My name is Dylan. I'm an engineer, systems and hardware, the kind of work where everything is supposed to add up, where rules matter. That's what I always loved about my job. My marriage, on the other hand, wasn't something I ever thought I'd need to debug. For nearly 10 years, I was married to Ellie, and in that time, I honestly believed we'd built something solid. We had our routines, weekday meals in our little condo in Capitol Hill, hiking on weekends, laughing at terrible reality TV. I thought I understood her. I thought I understood us. The first real crack showed up on a Thursday evening in late February, the kind of night when Seattle seems determined to soak every last patch of pavement. I got off work a little early, a rare treat since our project had just shipped, and I texted Ellie, asking if she needed a ride home. No answer. Not unusual. She was always busy during the end-of-day scramble. I figured I'd just swing by her office and surprise her. When I pulled up to the curb outside the big glass box of her company's building, rain hammered the windshield so hard I could barely see past the wipers. There was Ellie in the lobby, chatting with her boss, Greg. She didn't see me. I remember thinking she looked happy, animated, smiling, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in a while. Then, as if she suddenly remembered something urgent, she grabbed her coat, hurried out into the rain, and made a beeline for a dark sedan parked right at the front. Took a second for it to register. I watched as her boss, same guy, salt and pepper hair, a bit too smooth, opened the passenger door for her. Ellie ducked inside, her bag slung over her shoulder. I just sat there, engine idling, feeling something cold trickle down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. She almost never accepted rides from anyone. She always told me taxis or Ubers were easier, that it kept things simple and professional. I remember a time, years earlier, when she'd even turned down a coworker's offer for a lift, saying she didn't want work-life lines getting blurry. So why now? Why Greg? I followed the taillights as they disappeared into the rain, debating whether to call her, to text her, or to just go home. The rain drummed a steady rhythm on the roof of my car as I waited, feeling ridiculous, like I was spying on my own wife. But I did nothing. I just sat there until the clock read almost 6:30, then finally drove home, feeling small and a little bit stupid. Ellie came in a half hour later, raincoat tossed over one arm, hair slightly damp. She was humming some song I didn't recognize, the keys jingling in her hand. She seemed surprised to see me already home, but she covered it with a smile. Wow, you beat me back. Traffic must have been insane out there. I shrugged. Yeah. I ended up coming by your office, actually. I tried to make it sound casual, but my voice came out tighter than I meant. Saw you leaving. Didn't see you get a taxi, though. There was the briefest pause, just long enough for my brain to replay the image of her slipping into Greg's car. She laughed, soft but just a bit too high-pitched. Oh, Greg offered me a ride since he was heading my way. You know how bad the rain was. I didn't want to get drenched waiting for a cab. She gave me a look, a playful one, but underneath I saw something almost defensive. Are you seriously jealous right now? I tried to smile back. No, just, it's unusual, that's all. You always say you hate riding with coworkers. She waved a hand, already walking toward the kitchen to start dinner, her voice floating over her shoulder. Well, desperate times. I figured you'd be stuck at the lab late, anyway. We cooked together that night pasta with Jared sauce, garlic bread from the freezer. The conversation wandered from her day to what movie we should stream. But the air felt different. I couldn't shake the image of her and Greg in the car. Every time I glanced at her, she seemed a little more distracted, checking her phone, smiling at some text I couldn't see. I wanted to ask who it was, but I didn't. I told myself I was being crazy. But after dinner, as we sat at the table, Ellie suddenly changed the subject to something completely out of left field. You know, she said, pouring herself a second glass of wine, the thing that matters most in a relationship is trust. If you don't have that, you have nothing. She was looking straight at me, eyes steady, but her foot tapped under the table. I nodded, not really sure what to say. Yeah, of course. That's always been important to me. She smiled, but there was an edge to it now, almost a dare. So don't go getting suspicious just because my boss is nice and didn't want to see me drenched. She let out a light laugh, the kind you use to brush something off, and then, just like that, she changed topics again. By the way, did you remember to call your mom about her birthday? I blinked. Yeah, I left her a voicemail. She's planning to visit next month. Good, Ellie said. She was already collecting plates, clearing the table with her usual efficiency. The conversation moved on. We watched TV, made popcorn. But I kept seeing little flashes of that earlier moment. Her in the rain, hurrying to Greg's car, not even glancing back. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I stared up at the ceiling, counting the raindrops on the glass. Ellie fell asleep fast, turning away from me, her phone plugged in on her side of the bed, screen glowing briefly every now and then with a new message. I wanted to believe her story. Maybe she really did just get a ride from her boss to avoid getting soaked. Maybe I was just tired, or paranoid, or both. But there was something about the way she'd laughed, almost rehearsed, like she'd already played the conversation out in her head before I even asked. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like she was trying to control the story, not just explain what happened. The next morning, I tried to let it go. I told myself to be rational. After all, Seattle was famous for its rain, and her boss did live on our side of town. But as I watched Ellie getting ready for work, straightening her hair with more care than usual, I caught myself watching for signs. Tiny things, a new perfume, a phone call she took behind a closed door. Suddenly, everything seemed like it could mean something, or nothing. In all our years together, Ellie had never given me a reason not to trust her. But that night, something shifted. I started seeing shadows where before there was only routine. And even though she'd laughed off my question and changed the subject, deep down I knew. The rules between us had quietly, but permanently changed. And once you notice a crack, you can't help but look for more. After that night, nothing felt quite the same. I wish I could say I let it go, that I took Ellie at her word and just moved on. But the truth is, once that first seed of doubt took root, it was like weeds spreading through my brain. I tried to drown it out with work, with old routines, with forced laughter at her jokes. But the questions kept popping up, uninvited, like spam emails I couldn't delete. I started to see everything differently. Every little quirk or change in Ellie's routine felt like a clue in a puzzle I didn't want to be solving. I'd find myself replaying the events of the past few months, turning memories over and over like a detective with a cold case. There were her late nights at the office, which seemed to multiply after that rainy Thursday. At first, she'd text me updates, running late, big meeting, or grabbing drinks with the team. Don't wait up. I believed her, at least at first. But then the texts started coming later and later, sometimes not at all. She'd come home tired, distracted, almost relieved that I hadn't waited up. Sometimes she'd head straight for the shower, shutting the door and locking it behind her. A new habit. I remember thinking how strange that was, how unnecessary it seemed. I chalked it up to stress, to her wanting me time. But the feeling that something was off only grew stronger. Then there were the gifts. Ellie started coming home with things she'd claim were from work. Bottles of expensive wine, a new leather purse, a fancy scarf still with the tag on. She'd wave them off with a laugh. It was a team giveaway, she'd say. Greg's wife works in fashion. She gets discounts. Or, they were handing these out for meeting targets? Isn't that wild? But I couldn't help but notice that these little luxuries always seemed to appear after her late nights. And always, she'd get defensive if I asked too many questions. One weekend, I noticed she'd started going out for evening runs. Another new habit. Ellie had never been a runner. In fact, she used to joke that she'd only run if she was being chased. Now, out of nowhere, she was lacing up old sneakers and disappearing for 30, 40, sometimes 60 minutes after dinner. I'd watch her jog down the block from the living room window, wondering when she'd picked up this sudden urge for fitness. It helps clear my head, she told me when I finally asked. Work's been a lot. This is just for me. I tried to support her, told her I was proud of her, but even as I said it, a part of me was wondering who she was texting when she got back. Why her runs always coincided with the time Greg usually left the office. It wasn't just the big things, either. It was the way she'd started locking her phone, flipping it over whenever I was near. Ellie had always been open about her phone. Sometimes we'd even share playlists or laugh at memes together. Now, if her screen lit up, she'd turn it away from me. Sometimes she'd smile at her phone, thumbs flying over the keys, and if I walked into the room, she'd go stiff, tuck it away, and change the subject. Once I tried to bring it up, half joking, half not. "What? You got some top-secret project going on your phone?" I teased. She gave me a look that could freeze water. "Everyone at work's being paranoid about privacy these days," she said. "People snoop. You should be more careful too." She brushed past me, and I stood there, feeling like I just stepped on a landmine. I started to second-guess myself constantly. Was I just being possessive? Insecure? I'd never been that guy. The jealous husband. The one who needs to know every move his wife makes. I'd always prided myself on trusting Ellie. But trust, I was starting to realize, is easiest when there's nothing to hide. Now, I felt like I was living with a stranger who'd memorized my wife's routines. There were other things, too, that gnawed at me. One night, we were watching a movie, something we used to love doing together, and her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then turned the screen face down, letting out a little laugh. I asked her who it was, and she shrugged, saying it was just a work thing. But I saw the name. It was just an emoji, a fire emoji and a heart. No name. She didn't notice me noticing, but I couldn't let it go. A few nights later, I found her in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, voice hushed and urgent. When I walked in, she flinched, hung up instantly, and started rummaging in the fridge. "Just Karen from work," she said, not meeting my eyes. "She's freaking out about a presentation." I nodded, but I could feel the weight of her words, heavy and scripted. Sometimes I'd catch myself snooping, something I never thought I'd do. Checking the laundry for receipts, glancing at her phone screen when it flashed, watching her face for any sign of guilt or nervousness. I hated that part of myself, the part that was slowly transforming into someone suspicious, someone desperate for reassurance. But the more I tried to ignore the feeling, the stronger it got. I started waking up at odd hours, checking the bed beside me, making sure she was still there. Sometimes she wasn't. Once, around midnight, I found her sitting on the balcony, staring into the city lights, phone glowing in her hand. When I asked if she was okay, she jumped. "Just couldn't sleep," she mumbled, turning off her phone. "Go back to bed, Dylan." I wish I could say I confronted her then and there. I wish I could say I had the guts to ask for the truth. But instead, I just nodded and went back inside, lying awake for hours, listening for the sound of her coming back to bed. Looking back, I realize I was afraid, not just of what the answers might be, but of what it would mean for the life we'd built. Denial was easier than facing the possibility that everything was slipping away. One night, after a particularly late run, Ellie came home breathless, her cheeks flushed, hair windblown. I asked how it went, and she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good. Needed that." She grabbed a glass of water, scrolled her phone, and vanished into the shower. I stared after her, my heart sinking. Even friends started to notice. At a dinner party, one of Ellie's friends joked about her new mystery fitness coach. Ellie laughed it off, but her eyes darted to mine, a silent warning. Later, I overheard her whispering to her friend in the hallway. The words were muffled, but I caught, "Dylan's getting suspicious," and "Don't worry, I've got it handled." That hit harder than I expected. Got it handled, like I was a problem to be managed. After that, I started writing things down, just to keep myself from feeling like I was losing my mind. I kept a little notebook in my desk drawer. Late meetings, strange gifts, weird texts, times she went for a run. Sounds crazy even to me now, but I needed some way to make sense of it. I wanted to believe it was all just stress, a rough patch, something we could laugh about later. But deep down, I knew I was trying to collect proof for a reality I didn't want to accept. The weirdest part was how normal everything looked from the outside. Our friends would see us together and say we seemed strong as ever. My mom would ask about Ellie and say how lucky I was, and I'd nod, smile, say all the right things, while inside I felt like I was slowly sinking. Sometimes, when Ellie was asleep, I'd just watch her breathing, trying to remember the last time I'd felt truly close to her. The last time her laughter felt real and not like a cover for something else. It's a strange, lonely thing, to love someone and not recognize them anymore. I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to believe in us. But the rules had changed, and I couldn't pretend not to notice. I kept telling myself, it's just stress, it's just a phase, she'll come back to me. But another part of me, quieter but persistent, whispered that the game was already in motion, and I was the only one still playing by the old rules. And that's how the doubts took over. One tiny lie, one strange excuse, and suddenly, nothing was certain anymore. It's strange how quickly everything can unravel, how one discovery can turn doubt into certainty and your whole life into before and after. The days following my spiral into suspicion felt like a waking fever dream. I wanted so badly to be wrong, to find some innocent explanation that would put my mind at ease. But deep down, I think I was already preparing myself for the worst. It was a Tuesday night, late March, when it finally happened. I woke up sometime after midnight, expecting to find Ellie curled up beside me. But the bed was cold and empty. For a moment, I thought maybe she was just in the bathroom, but after a few minutes passed and I heard nothing, the anxiety that had become my shadow reared up again. I checked my phone. No texts. No missed calls. The digital clock glowed 2:14 a.m. I walked through the condo, trying to keep calm. Kitchen, living room, balcony, nothing. Her running shoes were gone from the entryway, but her gym bag was still by the door. The whole place felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors have left. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd had a last-minute emergency with a friend, maybe she couldn't sleep and decided to go for a late-night walk. But my gut twisted tighter with every minute she was gone. I called her cell straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I left a message, my voice shaky. Hey, it's late, just checking in. Call me back, okay? I sat on the couch, staring at the front door like if I did it long enough, she'd appear. But she didn't. At dawn, I finally got a text. Not a call, just a single, cold message going to my sisters, don't wait up. No explanation. No apology for not answering. Just a wall of silence. Something inside me went numb. I didn't even have the energy to reply. I got up, showered, went through the motions of getting ready for work. But in the mirror, my face looked pale and strange, a man who'd slept in fits, haunted by things he didn't want to see. That day, I went to work and tried to bury myself in numbers and code. But every notification on my phone made my stomach drop. Ellie's sister lived 2 hours away, and the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. My head kept spinning with scenarios, none of them good. I tried to focus, but the truth was, nothing in my life felt stable anymore. It was later that week when the last piece fell into place. Ellie still hadn't come home. She'd texted once, saying she needed space to think. I kept telling myself to respect her boundaries, to be patient. But the longer the silence dragged on, the more frantic my thoughts became. That's when I did something I'd never done before. I checked our shared online bank account. We didn't have secrets about money, or at least I thought we didn't. Maybe I reasoned seeing what she was spending money on would give me some sense of what was happening. What I found gutted me. There was a charge from the night she disappeared, a hotel in downtown Seattle, the kind of place that shows up in glossy travel magazines. Expensive, discreet. I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no conference, no business meeting. It was a place people went to disappear for the night. That might have been enough on its own. But then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, I got a notification on my phone. A photo had been added to our shared cloud archive. For a second, I thought it must have been a mistake, maybe a random screenshot *T or a receipt. But when I opened it, everything inside me went silent. It was Ellie. In a hotel room, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, standing in front of the window with the city lights behind her. Her boss, Greg, was there, 2 arms around her waist, their faces close, both smiling. The timestamp matched the hotel charge. There was no ambiguity. No, maybe it's innocent. No, maybe it's photoshopped. It was all right there in pixels and metadata. The truth ugly and undeniable. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the photo, waiting to feel something, rage, heartbreak, even relief at finally knowing. Instead, I just felt empty. Like my insides had been scooped out. I'd read about this feeling before, but nothing prepares you for the moment it happens to you. All I could think was, so this is it. This is how a marriage ends. I don't remember exactly how I packed. I just know I moved on autopilot, gathering some clothes, my laptop, toiletries. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text Ellie. I just needed to get out. I didn't want to see her or hear her explanations or sit through a tearful confession. I just wanted out of the wreckage. I found myself at a cheap extended stay motel, the kind with buzzing neon lights and scratchy sheets. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through old photos of us, trying to reconcile the woman in those memories with the one in that hotel room. The two versions wouldn't fit together. They were different people, separated by a single, irreversible act. The next day, I emailed my boss to say I needed some time off for personal reasons. No further explanation. I called a friend, my oldest friend, Matt, and tried to tell him what happened. The words got stuck in my throat, coming out in bursts, half-formed. He listened. He said all the right things. But really, there was nothing to say. Not that would make any of it better. Ellie texted once. Can we talk? I ignored it. I needed air. I needed space. I needed time to feel anything other than shock. That's the worst part, maybe the aftermath. The silence. The way you start to question everything, not just about your spouse, but about yourself. How did I not see it sooner? Was I blind? Naive? Stupid? Was this my fault somehow? Was I too distant? Too busy? Too wrapped up in my own routines? The questions circle endlessly, and the answers, if they come at all, offer little comfort. I stayed away for a week. Let my mind go numb with reruns on cable, takeout, bad coffee. I tried to sleep but mostly stared at the ceiling, haunted by images of that hotel room, by the sound of Ellie's laughter, real or imagined, with someone else. Eventually, I called a lawyer, made the necessary appointments, started the process of untangling two lives that, until recently, I thought were inseparable. I changed the passwords on my accounts, forwarded my mail, let my friends and family know, in the barest terms, that things weren't working out. There was no big scene, no explosive confrontation. In the end, I just faded out of Ellie's life the way she'd quietly faded out of mine. Maybe that was fitting. There was nothing left to fight for, just a series of moments that led to this, the quiet collapse of a life I thought I knew. If there's one thing I learned, it's that you can know someone for years and still not see who they really are. All it takes is one mistake, one night, one photo, and suddenly, everything you thought you knew is up for grabs. That's how my marriage ended. Not with a fight, but with a photo, a hotel charge, and the kind of silence that you can't talk your way out of. 9 years. That's how long it had been since everything fell apart. Since the photo, the hotel, the cold clarity that shattered the world I thought I knew. In those 9 years, I rebuilt myself piece by piece. Some parts of me never quite fit the way they used to, but I learned to accept the gaps. I changed jobs, moved to a smaller apartment overlooking Lake Union, started volunteering at a local makerspace just to be around people who didn't know me as Dylan, the guy whose wife cheated. Some days, the past felt like a story that happened to someone else. Other days, it was right there, a flicker of pain behind my ribs when a familiar song played or when I caught a glimpse of a stranger who looked a little like Ellie from behind. Life moved forward anyway. I got used to being on my own. I even started to like it. The encounter happened when I least expected it. Like these things always do. I was on my way to a conference in Chicago, standing in the security line at SeaTac, half awake and sipping burnt airport coffee, when I saw her. It was her hair I noticed first. Still that chestnut brown, cut a little shorter now, framing her face in a way that made her look both older and somehow softer. She was at the check-in counter, struggling with a suitcase that looked one size too large for a carry-on. The guy at the desk was telling her something, and she laughed in that easy, musical way I used to love and now barely recognized. I almost turned and walked the other way, but before I could, she glanced up, and our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. It was like time folded in on itself, the years shrinking down to nothing. Ellie's face went slack with shock, her mouth falling open, eyes shining with tears that hadn't had time to fall yet. I felt my own heart skip, then thud, then race ahead of my thoughts. She walked over, slow, uncertain, like she wasn't sure I'd stay put. "Dylan?" she said. Her voice so quiet I barely heard her above the airport noise. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. She blinked hard, a single tear spilling down her cheek before she could stop it. For a long moment we just stood there, two ghosts from a life neither of us lived anymore. Ellie spoke first. I never thought I'd see you again. God. Her voice broke. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a sob. You look different. So do you, I managed. My own voice sounded strange and used. She wiped at her eyes and shook her head. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, just wow. It's really you. For a second, I didn't know what to say. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore, just heavy with everything that had never been said. Finally, I managed, How have you been? Ellie smiled, a small, sad smile. Divorced, she said, glancing down at her boarding pass. Single. Messy. I don't even know where to start. She looked up at me again, searching my face for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe just proof that I was real. I think about you sometimes. About that night. If I had just told the truth, maybe everything would have been different. I wanted to be angry, to bring up the photo, the hotel, all the ways she'd broken my trust. But standing there in that sterile airport light, I just felt tired. We were both different people back then, I said. I don't know if it would have changed anything. She nodded, tears brimming again. I'm sorry, Dylan. Truly. I know it's late, way too late, but I want you to know I never forgot you. Or what I did. I live with it every day. She pulled out a tissue and pressed it to her eyes, laughing through her tears. God, I'm a mess. I tried to think of something wise or comforting to say, but my mind was blank. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the wear and regret on her face. She wasn't the villain I'd painted in my mind all these years. She was just human, flawed, older like me, haunted by her own mistakes. Are you happy? I asked, surprising myself. Ellie took a shaky breath. I'm trying, she said. I'm not sure I know what that means yet, but I'm trying. I nodded. That was the most honest thing either of us had said in a decade. The line started moving, and the moment threatened to dissolve into the airport crowd. Ellie reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, pressing it into my hand. I kept this. For a long time I wasn't sure why. But, it's yours. Maybe it'll help. I took it without looking, still stunned by how surreal the whole encounter felt. Take care of yourself, Ellie. You too, Dylan, she said, her voice raw. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. We stood there for another heartbeat, then let the crowd pull us apart. I watched her go, watched the past drift away down the concourse, lighter than I'd ever expected it to feel. I didn't open the envelope right away. I tucked it into my bag, found my gate, and sat with the sudden realization that, for the first time in years, the pain was just a memory, not a wound. Whatever happened next, I knew I'd survived. I'd made it through, and as my flight began to board, I let myself hope, just a little, that maybe something good was still waiting for me on the other side of all this. I wish I could say the envelope from Ellie slipped quietly into the past with the rest of our baggage, but it burned a hole in my pocket all the way to Chicago. I kept feeling it there, this tiny, physical weight that somehow brought back the heaviness I thought I'd finally shaken off. I didn't open it on the flight. I barely looked at it while settling into the anonymous comfort of my hotel room. But by the time midnight rolled around, jet-lagged and alone, I couldn't stand the suspense any longer. Inside the envelope was a small stack of papers. Some old bank documents, a brief, handwritten note in Ellie's familiar looping script, and a slip of paper with what looked like login credentials and a password. I stared at it, confused, until I started reading the note. Dylan, I know you probably never wanted to hear from me again, but I can't carry this any longer. There's something you deserve to know. When everything was falling apart before you left, I took money from our joint account. More than you probably realized. I told myself I needed it to heal, but really, I was running from the truth. I kept it in a separate account. It's all still there. The paperwork and the password are included. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to set things right, even if it's years too late. Ellie. I stared at the words, the confession echoing louder than any argument we ever had. For a few minutes, all I could feel was the old mix of anger and heartbreak. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd robbed me, too. That money was supposed to be ours, a safety net for whatever life threw our way. And she'd siphoned it off in the shadows, telling herself whatever story she needed to get through the day. I picked up the bank statement. The amount circled was staggering, much more than I'd ever noticed missing, back when I was too distracted by pain to monitor every dollar. There were transfers, cash withdrawals, even some charges that looked suspicious in hindsight. She hadn't just hurt me. She'd used me, and then left me to clean up the mess. For a while, I just sat at the tiny hotel desk, letting the betrayal sink in all over again. I felt old, stupid, and once again alone. But as I kept reading the note, a strange calm began to settle over me. I didn't want revenge, not after all this time. I just wanted closure, a clean slate, the sense that maybe I could walk away from it all with at least some part of myself restored. The next morning, I logged into the account Ellie had provided. Sure enough, the money was there. Every cent, untouched. I transferred it back into my own name, shaking with a mix of relief and resentment. It felt like closing a door that had been rattling in the wind for nearly a decade. A few hours later, as I was grabbing coffee in the hotel lobby, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ellie's voice was on the other end, quieter now, stripped of the sharpness I remembered from our last years together. "I'm sorry," she said. "No preamble, no small talk. I should have told you back then. But I couldn't face you. I couldn't face what I'd done." There was a long silence. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "I kept it all," she continued. "I never spent a dime, not after you left. I wanted to give it back, but I didn't know how. You deserve to have it. All of it. Why now?" I asked, my voice flat. Ellie took a shaky breath. "Because I saw your face at the airport. Because it's the last piece I can give back to you, Dylan. You don't owe me anything. I just needed to make it right." For a second, I wanted to lash out, to tell her how much it hurt, how the money was just another reminder of all the ways she'd broken my trust. But instead, I just let out a tired sigh. "I got it," I said. "It's done." "Thank you," she whispered. I could hear tears in her voice again. "I hope you can. I hope you can let go now." The call ended, leaving me in the echo of old wounds and the faintest hint of relief. I stared at the documents for a while longer, wondering how many other secrets were left scattered through the years. But this was one thing, at least, that I could finally put to rest. After the conference, I flew back to Seattle, lighter than I'd felt in years. The money didn't fix everything, not by a long sh*t, but it was a piece of my past returned to me, a little bit of justice, even if it came far too late. I filed away the documents, shut off my phone, and allowed myself to imagine, for the first time in a long time, a future that wasn't defined by what Ellie had done, but by what I chose to do next. For the first time since the night everything collapsed, I felt a fragile sense of freedom. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the guy stuck replaying old wounds. I was someone who had survived, who had taken back a little piece of what was lost. And that was enough for now. I thought the envelope, the money, and the awkward phone call would be the last loose ends from that old life. But the universe had one more surprise for me. As I left SeaTac after returning from Chicago, a man in a sharp suit approached me in the baggage area. He introduced himself as a lawyer representing one of Ellie's old companies. His tone was calm but urgent. "I need a word, Mr. Foster. It's about your ex-wife, Ellie," he said, pulling me aside. My stomach clenched. He explained that there was an internal investigation into financial misconduct tied to Ellie's last months at the company back when we were still married. My name, it turned out, was on a handful of documents and authorizations she'd apparently signed using my old digital credentials, something I'd long forgotten about. "She needed a backup plan," he said. "She used your name as a shield in case anything went wrong. Unfortunately, it's become a real threat to you." Shock gave way to cold anger. I felt used all over again, caught in the fallout from choices I never made. The lawyer gave me copies of documents and a warning: "Clear your name now before the investigation becomes criminal." Walking to my car, the old numbness was gone. This time I was angry and determined to end the story on my terms. I met with Ellie one last time in a bland coffee shop near downtown, paperwork stacked between us. I didn't want drama, just facts, signatures, proof that I was never part of her schemes. Ellie looked older, her confidence gone. She didn't argue. She just handed over everything: financial records, digital logs, a notarized letter swearing I was never involved. "Take it all, Dylan," she said quietly. "I don't want to run from this anymore. I'm sorry for everything. I turned all the documents over to the police and company investigators, clearing my name completely. The process took weeks, but it ended cleanly, my innocence beyond dispute. When it was finally done, I walked out of the lawyer's office and realized I felt nothing but lightness. No anger, no vengeance, just relief. Ellie disappeared from my life for good, swallowed by her own choices and mistakes. For the first time in a decade, the past felt like exactly that, the past. I was free. The story of my marriage and its betrayals belonged to someone else now, just a lesson learned, a chapter closed. The only thing left was my own future, finally unburdened and ready to begin.